Welcome back to This Week, where we talk with Republicans and bold voices working to turn the tide in California, challenging one-party Democrat rule and fighting to restore faith, freedom, and common sense in our state. Today's guest is David Hernandez, a Vietnam veteran, civic leader, and founder of the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club. Born in Lincoln Heights, David enlisted in the U.S. Navy after high school and served from 1967 to 71. He went on to build a 25-year career as an independent insurance adjuster, eventually running his own firm, while also serving as executive director of the San Fernando Chamber of Commerce and chair of the Mission College Foundation Board. A former candidate for mayor of LA, Congress, and lieutenant governor, David has led battles to preserve the cross on the LA County seal, stop the city's commercial trash monopoly, and defend small businesses. He currently chairs the Committee for Accountability and Good Government and co-hosts a weekly political show with Mary Ann Bernal, championing conservative values rooted in faith, service, and free enterprise. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
All of that. No wonder I feel tired.
Oh, yeah. You've done a lot. You've been involved. Throughout all the years of your political involvement in the city, how much has changed?
Not much, unfortunately. I mean, some of the, it has changed in a sense for the worse. Mm-hmm. Because here we are in 2025, a lot of the battles that I've had with anti-business, with the commercial trash franchise in Los Angeles, those are all battles against traditional Democrats who basically served self-interest and organized labor. Yeah. What we have today is you have Democrats that serve an ideology, and that's the Democrat Socialists of America. Yeah. And they are eating the lunch of those old traditional in-for-it themselves Democrats.
The Blue Dog Democrats?
Well, you have the ones like Gil Cedillo, like Kevin De Leon, Nuri Martinez, Jose Huizar. These Democrat Hispanic politicians that did the bidding of LA County Federation of Labor, that did the bidding of some groups, kind of like to placate them to see, like, if they go along to get along, they'll be able to stay in office. And what has happened, you've had the Democrat Socialists of America bring in candidates like David Hernandez, like Nita Rahman, that one that just beat Kevin De Leon. These are. They make no bones about it. These are Democrat socialists. And in order to get the Democrat Socialists of America endorsement, you have to sign a pledge that you're anti-Israel, you're for diversing all of your, all the city assets from there. And so what we see, and here we are today, we're getting ready for, some people are going to see tomorrow, the 14th, as the 250th anniversary of the United States Army, but others are going to see it as a day of rage to come out. What's the No King Day? Yeah, the protest. Right.
It's I think it's partially funded by a bunch of different Soros orgs, like Indivisible.
Actually, it's partially funded by us, the taxpayers.
That's right, USAID, right?
Yeah, because there's so many. There's so much money involved, and I think the framework for this was set up by Democrats who would never imagine that it would get to this extreme, because they would go ahead and they would have friends or relatives set up these nonprofits. And so say we had an issue in LA County with the foster care system, and where you had so many children that go through the foster care system in Los Angeles. And once they're 18, they're kicked out of the system. I mean, if you look at probably over 40% of the homeless in Los Angeles that are from Los Angeles came through the foster care system. That once they were turned 18, they were set out on the streets with no place to live, no place to work. They've grown up within the system. So naturally, they're turning to prostitution, they're turning to crime, they're turning to drug addiction. And so a lot of different nonprofits have been formed on face value to address a lot of these shortcomings, but in reality, they were basically set up to funnel millions and millions of dollars, whether it's from the federal government, the state government, or the county. And what we have is a struggle that's ongoing between, say, the traditional Democrats that are They're still in power, but so many of the socialists have established so many strong organizations within the city and the county that are getting all of this funding, all in the name of wanting to do good.
Yeah. It's funny because the left usually wraps all their ideological arguments and everything around this position of morality and empathy and these things that on face value, like you said, it seems good, but behind it, there's actually something really sinister, which is just the expansion of government and basically implementing communism into America.
Oh, absolutely, and funding it.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, we just had a bill introduced in the state Senate. I think it's SB 837. It's Senator Amenabar from the Northeast San Fernando Valley. And that was somebody that I supported because of who her opponent was. She's a veteran. She's a strong representative of the LGBT community. I had met her a number of times, and it's like, what, I could support this Democrat. And so she just introduced a bill that the juvenile justice system here in Los Angeles County, which has been plagued with a lot of problems, and some of them by design, that they want to take the operation of juvenile justice away from the probation department and give it to which used to be one of those NGOs that was sued by the Attorney General for their failures and their actions, who then went and changed their name, and then the County Board of Supervisors then made them a part of the county government.
Wow.
So this bill that the Senator Amenabar has just introduced is going to take away all of the $80 million budget, all of the authority from the LA County probation, and give it to the same organization, but now under a different name, which is now an official department of the county.
Isn't that crazy? Because you see it happen on so many different levels. That I was just at a board of supervisor meeting a few weeks ago where they were voting on a specific. I think it was in Torrance, but they were going to transform it basically build out more homeless housing, right? And I think they were looking to approve like $100 million or something. And they approved a similar project. I think 10 months ago, and it was the company within a month filed for bankruptcy. They gave them $114 million. That money disappeared. Yeah. There's no investigation, no accountability. The company's called Shangri-La, and there's another company associated with it too. I can't remember which one it was, but there are a lot of people from Torrance there who were very upset and didn't want that to be turned into homeless housing because they were, it's going to bring down property value. It's going to bring crime. It's going to bring a lot of negative elements. I know for a fact that, you want to help people who are homeless, right? But it does come with an element of danger and depreciation of your community.
Absolutely. When former Mayor Garcetti was talking about the bridge program, and they were going to set up this bridge housing in certain areas, and the guarantee was the people that were going to be housed there were people that were that had been homeless in an immediate 3-mile vicinity of where the shelter is going to be. So it's not like you're bringing new homeless, but you're taking homeless off the street. So that makes sense. But it also was a provision that they, since there was a place for them to go, that there wouldn't be homeless encampments tolerated within that certain radius. And so that was a big deal. So the first one was right there on Alameda, actually right down the street from where all of the protests are going on today, by Alameda and Los Angeles Street. And so that was going to be, that's the flagship of the bridge housing. And there was a park that was right next to it. This is right next to Alvera Street and Union Station. And so they cleaned up the homeless that were there in the park. They built this bridge housing. You go there today, the bridge housing is full operational, but around it on Alameda in the park, you have homeless everywhere.
Still everywhere. Yeah, they're still everywhere.
So the homeless in Los Angeles is worse than ever. But the reality behind all of that is that there's so much money to be made by connected developers that are part of, say, LA Family Housing, that had contracts with the Los Angeles Housing Service Authority, that if they're able to get $800,000 for a single studio apartment for homeless, and you're going to build a 24 units of studio apartments. I mean, that's almost $1 billion.
Yeah,
for 24 people.
Exactly. There's that building downtown. It was just 600 million something. It was just pretty much that per unit, and it's crazy how much we spend per unit compared to other parts of the country. They spend like 20 to 40,000 per homeless unit, and it's a little bit of a racket. I mean, it's a little bit, yeah.
Well. And then you have the mayor saying that, refusing to be audited for any of this stuff. Part of my background, I was an independent insurance adjuster for a while, and so I'm used to writing reports and reviewing reports. So one of the sources where I like to go to find out what's really going on is the LA City Controller's website.
Yeah,
you can go there and you can review current audits, past audits. And if you start looking at the audit summaries, whichever, if it's the police department, the homeless authority, whether it's streets or whatever it is, you can review the audit that the controller office has done, through the years, and all of the deficiencies are glaring, except that the controller is advisory only. They have no authority to enforce these things. So, and what I have found, to their credit, that regardless of what political party that they're with, you had early on Ruth Galanter, you had Wendy Gruhl, you even had Ron Galperin, and regardless of whether they were moderate or progressive Democrats, the audits were very telling. When they audited the LAHRC, the Joint LA City and LA County Housing Authority, that was responsible for hundreds and millions of dollars, their success rate is like 5%. Whether it's in housing, whether it's in mental health services, it was a constant failure.
Because all the money goes to administrative fees or paying.
Well, it goes to administrative. It goes to construction. When I found out that LA Family Housing had a construction component to it, they're the ones getting the $800,000 per unit.
Yeah.
And when at one town hall meeting, I confronted the head of the LA Family Housing at that time. How do you justify? And back then it was only $600,000 per unit. How do you justify this? And she says, well, we are setting the standard for green energy building in the country.
That BS.
and that we are also setting the standard for not only a living wage, but a sound wage. And so between the cost of labor and the cost of the environmental project that they were doing, it skyrocketed the cost. So I said, look, what you're talking about is you have 10 747s crash in the streets of LA, and rather than setting up triage, you want to spend $200 million on a hospital that's going to be completed in 5 years.
Basically, yeah.
And so that's what we have. That's why we have more than 5 people a day in Los Angeles dying on the streets. And that has become norm here at a time when you had just within the past 6 months, the county finally came to terms with our relationship with the city in dealing with the homeless is not working. So they split. But the county still passed a 0.5 cent sales tax in order to fund the homeless. So what are they going to do with it? And so you just talked about a meeting in Torrance that the county wants to have. Yeah. Well, there's where they want to go. That now they want to go ahead and be the arbiters of where that funding goes, and with no guarantees that it's going to be any different. And
it's interesting you brought up the accounting aspect of it, because I know that the current Kevin Mejia, I think that's his last name. He just tried to do a forensic. He applied to do a forensic accounting of where all the money, I think it was over $1 billion in 5 years, that went towards homelessness, and he got shut down by the mayor's office. they refused to allow him to go through and audit all of it.
Right.
So there's a lot of rot in the Democrat Party, and a lot of it is because they basically have single party rule. They have the equivalent of an authoritarian regime in California where there's no accountability. You know, they get to do whatever they want. They can pass it by executive order Newsom can sign 400 executive orders, bypass the assembly, even the assembly and the Senate, even though he has both of those, majorities on both of those. So it really is, it's crazy. And I want to bring it back to something you mentioned about how the DSA has been taking over the Democrat Party and how, I've been seeing this on many different levels, and I see it in conversations with other people, with other Republicans, that they have truly infiltrated. I mean, you go to most neighborhood councils, it's all DSA. My neighborhood council in North Hollywood, it's all DSA. It's 12 people. They're all Democrat Socialists of America. There's a strict consensus on it with everything. They don't vote or offer any different ideas. I'm just wondering.
Is that North Hollywood, Northeast?
No, because there's 3 in North Hollywood. So it's North Hollywood, North Hollywood. It's NoHo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The NoHo one. Okay.
Yeah, because there's East and there's West and there's NoHo.
Yeah, because when the neighborhood council system first began, I was on the formation of the North Hollywood Northeast, and it was great because there was only 12 of us. Yeah, they had the Midtown North Hollywood. It was huge back then. It was like 25 people on there.
Yeah,
and they were really, they thought we look at how many people we have on our neighborhood council, and we said, well, that's great, but we get the same amount of money, and there's only 12 of us.
Yeah,
and so then when they started North Hollywood Northwest. But that all goes back to when the San Fernando Valley wanted to separate itself from Los Angeles, the Valley secession movement. And so our big thing was local control. And even though it passed in the San Fernando Valley, it didn't pass in the rest of the city. But in order to fend off any other attempts, Mayor Hahn at that time, gave us the neighborhood council system. And when it started, it was really good because you had individuals from all political parties, and some people that had never been involved in politics, because we were all working together for the Valley's independence movement. And so you had Democrats that were running for city council and Republicans, and I ran for mayor. And I ran for mayor because the Latino politicians back then, Alex Padilla, who's in the news today, Tony Cardenas, who was there, Felipe Fuentes, Richard Alarcon, Neri Martinez. I mean, all of these people that, have been race baiters, all their political life, always blaming white people for all of the challenges in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. They said the secession movement was a white flight movement so that the Valley could separate itself from the white people. Or the white people can separate themselves from the poor brown people in Los Angeles. Yeah. And that was so far from the truth. And so we had a lot of people in the San Fernando Valley working together from very progressive to, very conservative. And so we got the neighborhood council system. We spent a lot of time formulating them. It was great because we came up with our own bylaws. We sat down and we had open discussion for what's the common good of the area that we were assigned, and we came up with a set of bylaws. We promoted different projects. We controlled our own elections, and so it started spreading really well. Granted, there was different neighborhood councils depending on the area, and it should be because the Pacoima is not the same as West Los Angeles. Yeah. So there's different issues within a community that need to be addressed. Well, the IBEW union put a ballot measure on the ballot so that they could take complete control over solar in Los Angeles. Yeah. So that would be no solar companies, just the IBEW union. And so we're talking within the neighborhood councils. It's like, yeah, we're for solar. But we're not for a monopoly. Yeah. And so you had progressives and conservatives of neighborhood councils going around the entire city of Los Angeles, speaking out in favor of solar, but against a monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
The union spent millions and lost the election.
Uh-huh.
The city then realized what they had created. They had created a real independent voice because people, regardless of where they stood on other issues,
Mm-hmm.
were talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so that diversity of thought, values came together when it came for the common good, became very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to rectify that mistake, the city pointed out, well, you only get so much a year to spend in your district.
Mm-hmm.
Why should you have to spend that money on elections? Let the city clerk take over the elections for you. That way you can use your money for cleanups, for beautification projects. You want murals. And that sounded good.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, the city starts dictating the elections. And since they're doing the elections, it's like, wait a minute. At that time, you have 88 neighborhood councils.
Mm-hmm.
So the bylaws, say in San Pedro
Mm-hmm.
or in Lake Balboa, they're so different
Yeah.
because you're using taxpayer money. It only makes sense that we have a template
Mm-hmm.
for the bylaws. So the city took over and drafted the bylaws that the neighborhood councils were going to have to operate under.
So it tried to unify all of them under one set of bylaws.
Well, to unify them under compliance,
Gotcha.
because what basically it was set up that the city now set the standards.
Mm-hmm.
And so because you're dealing with taxpayer money, then they started infusing into the bylaws all the compliance requirements, all the training that you have to go through, and all of a sudden, instead of you having a debit card as a neighborhood council that you can just, somebody could come and, request funding, all of a sudden it started to have to go through the city.
Wow.
And so the city then took over, by that action,
Mm-hmm.
took over total control of the neighborhood councils.
Yeah.
And so they controlled the elections, they controlled the bylaws, they controlled the money. And so when you go to some neighborhood council meetings,
Mm-hmm.
the first hour and a half after the local politicians' reps go there and give a report showing how good their elected official is doing,
Yeah.
then you've got to sit there and listen to a compliance and who's gone to budget training, who's gone to ethics training, who's
Mm-hmm.
gone to that, and who's gone to that, and no, you can't do this and you can't do that. And meanwhile, the public that thinks, well, I've got a problem with an abandoned car, or there's overgrown trees, street lights, or that. I'm going to go there and I'm going to go to my neighborhood council to get some help.
Mm-hmm.
An hour and a half later, they're still listening to compliance and bickering back and forth. And
So they basically they got something that what people were using to improve their communities and to inform people, and they made it so bureaucratic that it became ineffective.
right.
They made it government.
Well, what they did, they made it in charge. So there's it is seemingly local control,
Yeah.
but in reality, it's not.
It's the perception. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, well, it's better to give them the perception,
Yeah.
because then they can't unify. They can't go ahead and take a position against something that the city wants on the ballot.
That's so interesting. And that comes down to so many different, parts of government, that it's purely about the perception of something being done. And then when something is actually done, something good is being done from the volume of reaction that you get from the other side. And usually the reaction is political theater. You mentioned the Alex Padilla thing, it's that to me is just pure political theater that he did. Just interrupting the Homeland Security Secretary, while she's mid statement, and then presenting himself as a victim, even though he had nothing identifying him. I'm sure that most people who know politics would have known that it was him, but an FBI agent who's there to ensure the security of the secretary is going to be like,
especially in this volatile times.
Exactly.
Look at what's happening in the streets. There's a war taking place out in the streets, and so you have Christian there, and there's a crowd of people.
Yeah.
Come on, this is where Bobby Kennedy was murdered.
That's
this
true.
is where, I mean, there is with the height of the tension right now, and the dangerous people that are in the street. Come on, you don't have time. Oh, excuse me, you look familiar. Let me look up the roster of the U.S. Senate to see.
Exactly.
Is that Padilla?
Let me look up your name real quick. And the thing is that I think that hasn't been mentioned as often as it should, but the majority of the demonstrations are outside the DHS building specifically.
Yeah.
So it's people have numerous times throughout the day tried to
get
hit
in
that building. Yeah. And the National Guard is stationed specifically outside that building. Most of the destruction, the spray painting, all that stuff outside that building. So, it's not unreasonable for the agents to react the way that he did because, security lapses can happen. You got
and
this.
do.
You do.
I mean, I was at an event for Robert F. Kennedy here in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And there was security there, and he hadn't arrived yet, but someone showed up. He was in a tactical gear. I mean, he looked like a government agent.
Yeah.
And he wasn't. And he had two guns on him.
Wow.
And they took him down at the entrance because they realized, wait a minute, he had a badge hanging around his neck.
Yeah.
And I was in the lobby, and all of a sudden I see all of the police are descending on this guy. Like, well, I thought this guy might have been Secret Service, or he wasn't. He was there to do some bad things.
Yeah.
Those people are out there.
They are. I mean, you don't need a greater example than it happened to the president
Twice.
While he was on the campaign trail. And you had Secret Service, you had local law enforcement in Pennsylvania, you had everything involved, and it still happened. So Democrats have perfected the art of political theater to amplify this neo-Marxist grievance politics of theirs, right?
Yeah.
Where everything, they hone in on the anger and just implode that into fear with this like theater kid.
Well, it's like, who was that? Rob Emanuel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Never let a crisis go to waste.
Yeah.
And so now you have, I mean, from the very beginning of what's happened over the past, 4 or 5 days, the elected officials have been complicit in creating the hysteria, in creating the fear, and inciting people to violence.
Yeah.
Because, prime example, you had the assembly member over in the Downey Southgate area. There is an ICE facility next door to Home Depot.
Yeah.
They were preparing to execute warrants on known criminals who were in the country illegally.
Who's the assembly member? I don't think I'm familiar with this one.
Salachi. Okay, Salachi, District 62. Okay. They had the ICE vehicles were parked as a staging area in the Home Depot parking lot as they were doing their briefing, getting ready to go serve those warrants. He sends out a call that ICE is raiding Home Depot.
Wow.
And a call to action for people to hit the streets.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. They hit the streets. They started, surrounding people. That started from that misinformation. Now, they haven't changed the narrative, even though they know the truth now.
Yeah.
Over in the Garment District, when when ICE went in there, they were going to a specific business because they had warrants for the business. They had warrants for individuals there.
Yeah.
They had warrants because they knew that there was criminal activity taking place within that business. But what did the mayor say? Oh, they're just picking on random businesses in Los Angeles.
Yeah, they keep running with this narrative of picking on random businesses. They're going after families. They're going to graduation ceremonies. Which isn't happening. And one thing that I saw today, it was a clip of one of our city council members. I can't remember what her name is, but she was asking the chief of the LAPD if there was a way that he could inform businesses before ICE.
That was Isabel Gerardo, the newest DSA candidate or the newest DSA council member.
Yeah.
Now, one of her aides was arrested for assaulting an officer
At the riots?
Yeah.
Interesting.
That was just like within the past 3 days.
Not surprising.
Well, because who else are these DSA elected officials going to hire? They're going to hire radicals.
Yeah, exactly.
And so and so what has happened, like the first couple of days, I mean, when we go back to, what was it, 2 weeks ago, when DSA picked up somebody, and not DSA, but the ICE picked up somebody, they started having protests at the federal detention center, the Roybal Center there on Alameda and First Street. That's where that's the federal detention. They have the federal court there. And so people started demonstrating back then. And so here, fast forward to the beginning, Thursday night or Friday, here, because the elected officials and social media influencers and different groups are driving people to the street, these ICE officers, they're in peril.
They are,
and
100%.
So
yeah.
when that happened, like in Paramount, and they called for help, or when it happened in LA and they call for help, and LAPD does not respond, either because they've been instructed not to, or they're overwhelmed in some other area, who is going to come in and offer support? Newsom didn't step up and send in the National Guard.
Yeah.
So President Trump goes ahead and he brings in the National Guard within like 24 hours, and they're there to protect the federal buildings, and also they protect the federal
workers,
the federal workers and the agents, because when you hear then the mayors say, well, we have enough with LAPD to protect. Well, apparently not, because look at your city. Look at all of the graffiti, the looting, and all of that. Yeah. Because their position has always been, well, it's only property. We don't want to engage. It's only property. That's why the mass lootings are taking place. Yeah. With the police standing by and watching. Well, if you can't protect your own private citizens' private property, you sure as heck aren't going to protect the federal building. And so the National Guard comes in to protect the federal buildings and the federal employees and agents, and they're trying to make it seem like, oh, the National Guard is going to go start rounding up people, at schools and things like that.
Totally misframed it, and they did it on purpose to stoke more fear. They made it seem like the National Guard was just marching through the streets of LA. This is like a hostile takeover of the federal government or our state, infringing on our state's sovereignty and all this stuff. But the reality is I've been down there several days, and I saw a lot of it downtown. I actually went to Paramount too when right after they got some folks out of that Home Depot. And what I saw was the National Guard was strictly, just like you said, at federal buildings, and ensuring that federal workers can work safely, they can go in and out. And I actually caught, and I'm not entirely sure if it's this guy, because I saw a guy published on the DHS website that was arrested for throwing Molotov cocktails at LAPD. I did catch ICE, federal agents, arresting one guy, and I know it was federal agents because they didn't have an LAPD uniform. They weren't CHP because they weren't wearing CHP. They had the vests. And I just couldn't tell if it said DHI or FBI, because there was also FBI down there. So these guys are arresting this guy, and this mob notices it, and they start running towards them. And all of a sudden, like flashbangs, fireworks, like everything starts getting thrown. And I can't even tell where it's coming from. They manage to get the guy into this van, and then the van pulls off, and then two agents get into a truck. And the protesters are like everybody's a little confused because of how many flashbangs were thrown. But then they realize that there are two agents in this truck, this white pickup truck, and the truck isn't starting. You hear it go, it won't start for some reason. And they start attacking the truck. And then LAPD, like 2 minutes later, like comes in, and it's like more flashbangs, more rubber bullets. It felt like a war zone.
Well, it is. And especially because so many professional agitators are being brought into Los Angeles to really instigate the violence. And so you have people that are out on the street that are fearful and angry. they're exercising their First Amendment rights. Okay, that's fine. But then you have the agitators coming in, and then you have the people that get caught up in the moment. They get caught up with the adrenaline and the anger, and all of a sudden you see kids with skateboards banging on news vans, and you see all this the violence that's taking place, and so the people that are really being hurt are especially those without documents that are in an area that's going to be controlled. Mm-hmm. And if they're without documents and they're there and they're even if they were just participating, they're going to be held accountable. And when the city of LA and the county, by being a sanctuary city, by saying no, we are not going to turn over undocumented people when they've been arrested for other crimes. Mm-hmm. What you're doing is you're forcing ICE to go, because ICE knows who they are and where they live. Yeah. So when they're released from jail, where there could have been a very peaceful, safe transfer, mm-hmm. now they've got to go into a community where they don't know what they're going to run into, whether the person is going to be armed, whether there's going to be a confrontation. So they come in force, and it looks, it looks exactly what it's like, because they have to protect themselves. Yeah, they do. Yeah. And then you have politicians that are saying, well, they shouldn't be wearing masks or hoods. Well, the opposition is posting pictures of them.
They're doxing them.
They're doxing them. Yeah. They're posting their home addresses. The people are showing up at their homes, mm-hmm. and terrorizing their families.
They're showing up at their hotel in Pasadena just 2 days ago.
And Whittier. And Whittier as well.
I think it was actually Whittier, the videos I saw. It was in Pasadena.
Yeah.
And I saw a video, like hundreds of people, and they're filming them inside their rooms. Mm-hmm. It's nuts.
Yeah. So naturally, they're not going to be out there because that happening. And so, we'll see what happens. This weekend it's supposed to be the big, a big protest because it's President Trump's birthday, and mm-hmm. there's going to be a big military parade. Well, it's the 250th anniversary of the United States Army. Yeah. And so the fact that it's on his birthday, I mean, this was planned way before he ever took office. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be something. I know that LAPD is preparing on Saturday. A group of us, a group that I belong to, we're going to be providing breakfast for about 700 officers over at the police academy. It's going to be their staging area. Mm-hmm. And then dinner for about 1,500 officers Saturday night over there. And so we've got together with our group, Churches in Action, which is a nonprofit, mm-hmm. and we've reached out to other different businesses and other different churches that they're going to be providing the food for them, because it's going to be a very rough weekend here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that, because I saw firsthand how much abuse those guys get, those men and women, because there are a lot of women too who are on the front lines. They get verbally abused for hours on end in the hot sun with that uniform. Mm-hmm. They're getting bottles, rocks, fireworks, mortars chucked at them, glass mm-hmm. bottles. They'll drive by and people are throwing stuff at their cars. I saw a video yesterday. There's a video going around of a cop getting hit with a rock on the 101, but there's another one that I hadn't seen that was actually broadcast on Fox Live. And this police officer is, I don't know why he's like that far out, but he's trying to run back under the underpass, mm-hmm. and it's like 50 rocks. It's like he's dodging.
Yeah, that was on the 101 freeway. Yeah. That was, I think a lot of those, that was a highway patrol. Yeah. And so Newsom sends in these highway patrol units because the 101 freeway northbound was blocked. Yeah. And so they come in there and they stop their vehicles right there by the underpass. Yeah. And then right above there, as you have hundreds of people up there, they're throwing down concrete cinder blocks. They're throwing down those lime scooters, from the top on. They're pelting the cars. Yeah. And the officers trying to get through there. So here you have the highway patrol and all the officers are under the overpass in order to not be struck. Mm-hmm. And where's LAPD addressing all of the people up on top who were throwing everything down. And it didn't just happen and stop. They were doing it for quite some time.
Yeah.
They were bringing in supplies to throw down on the highway patrol. And so when the mayor and the governor say, well, we have it under control. Well, here you have the highway patrol officers that are there, basically they're being held hostage under the overpass while they're being pelted.
Yeah.
And no one is up there addressing these people that are committing felonies after felonies.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that on that specific block, they had 2 skirmish lines set up. Every time I've been there, there was 2 different skirmish lines on both sides of the block. And for some reason that day, it wasn't there. It almost, sometimes, and I don't want to speculate that law enforcement would do this, but it comes down to something we were talking beforehand about our mayor and her training in this sort of destabilization of government. It almost feels deliberate, the actions that she's doing, because it's off of that Marxist playbook on how to subvert an entire society and expand government, right? I think I don't know. If there's somebody in LA who is actually not disappointed with her leadership, what world are you living in, right? I do want to talk more about her background, though, because it's something we were talking about before. You mentioned that she was a part of a brigade here.
Yeah, and that was the Communist Party.
Yeah.
Now back then, it wasn't as blatant as it is now. Now when you see these demonstrations and you have all of the signs that are all printed by International Answer.
Yeah.
So it's right out there. It's almost like they have to do a disclaimer, like on political campaign material.
Yeah.
So they put International Answer. Then you look it up and it's like, wait a minute. This is a Communist Party.
Yeah.
So that, so a lot of that. So, before she was an assembly member that, and she was part of that communist organization, which I really, even though this is where I grew up, I really wasn't aware of that. I wasn't that involved in politics back then. But it was a writer from the LA Times that pointed out to me is how come, Rick Caruso isn't talking about her being a member of the Communist Party.
Yeah.
Her and Antonio Villagrosa.
Yeah.
And now they may have done it just in order to get the resources. I don't know. But it sounds like it's, with her different trips to Cuba, it sounds like a little bit more than just a campaign stunt.
Yeah. It sounds like she was being trained to come to America and undo our country from within.
Yeah.
It sounds like, that whole what is it, the Manchurian Candidate?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
Just have that big Cheshire cat smile.
Yeah.
And
it's so true, and it's so funny. I do think, though, that there's a unifying aspect. I see both sides of the political spectrum very upset with her.
Yeah.
Because while everything was happening, I think on the 5th or 6th day, the day that they announced the curfew, there was a faith-based event that happened downtown, and there were a lot of Christian leaders. There were some Jewish leaders as well. They were all speaking. They're all leftists, but they were all speaking from that side. And she popped in for like 2 minutes to give a speech, and then got right back into her truck. The moment that she stepped out, and then when she left stage again, she got heckled the whole time by people, leftists, very far leftists, saying like, "Where are you? What are you doing? You gotta go after Trump." And so I think that the unifying or the hope, the silver lining in this is that both sides are equally upset with our state and our city's leadership. So maybe there's an opportunity there.
And you see so many former Democrat leaders are re-registering Republican.
Yeah.
You had Gloria Romero was one of the first. He basically said, hey, and I hear she was the leader of the Senate in Sacramento.
Yeah.
And she's basically like, these people do not represent the Democrat Party anymore. And recently you had Alex Villanueva, the former sheriff. He and his wife registered as a Republican. In fact, I had an event at the Doubletree in Whittier last Saturday, and he was my main speaker as we welcomed him to the Republican Party.
That's amazing.
And I had a lot of former mayors that there from different cities like Arcadia, Rancho Palos Verdes, and Cudahy, and some. They were all Republicans because in LA County you have 88 cities, and within those 88 cities you have cities that have Republican mayors and have Republican city council members and school board members, and so the battle is far from lost in LA County. But there needs to be a concerted effort to get more people elected to those school boards and city councils.
Yeah. The theme that keeps coming back that a lot of people keep mentioning to me was the Bush, Karl Rove method that they did in Texas, that they flipped Texas red. Texas had been blue for a few decades. And they set this goal of getting 25 or 26 congressional candidates elected and getting the governorship. And I think they got 21, and they got Bush got elected governor. It seems like we're getting something like that organized, but it needs. I think that we need like a face. Right, of the party. I think it's kind of getting to that, especially with the governor's race coming together.
But I've met, I sat down with Steve Hilton at 2 Republican conventions ago. And we had a one-on-one, and he goes, David, I'm going to run for governor. What do you think? I said, save your money. You can't win.
Yeah.
He goes, what? Why? I go, because LA County is an anchor around the neck of California. You look at the rest of the state, it's red.
Yeah.
But LA County with 5 million, or rather 3 million registered Democrats. I mean, and I told him California has 10 million registered Democrats, 5 million Republicans.
Yeah.
Donald Trump could not beat Kamala Harris in California.
Yeah.
How are you going to beat one of the top Democrat opponents?
Yeah.
I said, unless you do something to help LA County become viable again, you don't have a chance. And that's the same thing, same message for Chad Bianco, that with a 1 million, a little bit more than 1 million Republicans in LA County, about 40% don't vote. They've given up.
Yeah.
You can only beat them over the head with election fraud and, election integrity. And for so much, people are looking for a reason not to participate. They're tired of having all this angst and frustration and yelling at the television set. Why not just back away and just enjoy your family and, make money and go on vacation? Why why get involved in a lost cause that causes nothing but emotional and spiritual turmoil?
Yeah.
And as a result, 40% of Republicans are not voting.
Yeah.
Now, the Democrats, over 50% of them aren't voting either. But in LA County, there's 3 million of them.
Yeah.
So they can afford to lose 50% of their Democratic base voting. We can't.
Yeah.
We have to get people who used to be looked at as, well, it's the low-hanging fruit. Don't talk to Republicans. Go talk to the independents, the declined estates and the moderate Democrats. You've got to talk to the choir, because half of the choir has stopped singing.
Yeah, you got to energize the base so that they feel excited again, and they help you do the footwork, because there's a lot of footwork to be done. I've been going out and we've been the assembly district I'm a part of. We've been doing events and registering people, and a lot. The last event we did,
the 44th.
44th.
Yeah, that's the assembly district I'm in.
Yeah. So Lisa Cusack has been doing a terrific job organizing those, and the last event we did, we actually got 2 former Democrats, one who went no party preference, and then the other one registered Republican. So, we did a few other events, even at a college. One person ended up registering Democrat. Everybody else was no party preference, which for a college, I think is pretty good, considering how indoctrinated they get in their classes. But there's a lot of footwork. I think if like you mentioned, if you energize the base, you get people excited. to come out
Mm-hmm.
and you know, show that Republicans are still here. You know, because I think a lot of people just forget that they either buy into the idea that Republicans are all demons,
Mm-hmm.
right, and hate people, which is the complete opposite of what the Republican Party was founded on and stands on. It was a party that opposed slavery. It was a party that it was the party of Lincoln.
You know, here we're talking about the president has no authority to bring out the National Guard over the governor. Well, wait a minute. When was the last time that was done? That was when the Kennedy brought out the National Guard in Alabama.
Yeah.
Because the Democrat governor Wallace, they wouldn't allow integration at the schools. And so when I tell people the Democrat Party is the party of slavery, not the Republicans.
And they're anti-civil rights too. Robert Byrd did an 18-hour filibuster to try to stop it. And they act like the Dixiecrats left the party. Like there was a shift mid-century in the 20th century. They didn't. Robert Byrd was a Democrat until 2010, the day he died.
Yeah.
He still voted, and Hillary Clinton gave him a eulogy. Former KKK member.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when I bring that up, first people deny it.
Yeah.
But then they say, well, it's not the same as it was back then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Where did it change? Tell me exactly what happened. Where it changed were now the Republicans who were responsible for ending slavery in the United States are now the ones that hate black people or hate Hispanics, and they can't.
Yeah.
They've been told that, okay, we can't really defend the Democrat Party of old because they were the slave party.
Yeah.
They were the party that gave us Jim Crow laws, that all of these different things. And it's funny now here in California when you're pushing for ID in order to vote, it's like, oh, that's Jim Crow. That's the Republicans from old are that proves that they're here. No, that was the Democrats that did all of that.
Yeah.
And so it's exciting times because there is a lot of movement as more people get aware of what's going on. When the COVID restrictions came in and parents started seeing what their kids were learning in school and being indoctrinated into, they're like, wait a minute,
going on? Yeah.
What's going on here? And then all of a sudden they're starting to pay attention to education. And then they're seeing these bills that are coming out that have impacted education. And so
strip them of their parental rights.
Yeah, so they see that stuff, and then they also see others. It's like, well, wait a minute, how did it get this bad without me knowing it? And when I point out to them, I said, look, you got a supermajority in the Assembly, you got a supermajority in the Senate, you have governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, treasurer, controller, superintendent of public instruction, all Democrats.
Yeah.
You're in LA County, you got 4 out of 5 supervisors, Democrats. The city of LA, you've got 15 city council members, 14 are Democrats. Republicans aren't in charge of anything.
Yeah.
The only thing Republicans are useful for is they're a scapegoat for failed Democrat policies.
And it's so great that you bring that up, because I've had this discussion with so many people, so many Democrats, and they will go as far as bringing up Reagan 50 years ago to blame for problems that are happening now. And I just ask them, like, when are you going to start taking accountability? California has had this much Democrat rule for literally 50 years. And then they'll bring up Schwarzenegger. I'm like, okay, well, he wasn't even really a Republican.
I mean, and you don't even have to go back, because here we're talking about Proposition 36 that was passed in the last election.
Yeah.
10 million Californians voted for Proposition 36. There's only 5 million Republicans in California. So that was 5 million, and with 40% not voting, that was probably more like 6 or 7 million Democrats and independents voted for Prop 46. What was Prop 46 going to do? It was going to set up a mental health programs for individuals that are charged with a crime. Then the judge can say you can go to treatment or you can go to prison. And they passed it because they wanted that. Well, the Assembly and Senate and governor refused to fund it, even though you have so much money that has been like we say with a county, a half a cent sales tax to address the homeless. A major part of the homelessness is mental health.
Yeah.
And so there has to be facilities for that. And so unless there is funding to set up these facilities, I know when they decriminalized a lot of the drug offenses, you had a lot of sober living homes, a lot of treatment centers went out of business because they no longer had clients, because you have a drug addict that's would be facing prison or treatment. You eliminate those two options, and they end up dying on the streets. And so it's really something to see how, in the name of compassion, that individuals are being allowed to be not only homeless, but the fact is that they don't have the mental capacity to make a decision that they want help.
Yeah. Yeah, and you start working with a lot of these folks. The mental health aspect is the biggest aspect. Democrats will literally blame everything but that, because it's a lot easier for them to deflect than to actually look at the situation. I'm just wondering, how do we turn that around? How do we have a red wave in California?
Well, I mean, it's going to probably start with a very light purple, maybe lavender.
Yeah.
But as more people are being educated, because no matter who you talk to, someone's going to have a problem with something, whether it's the potholes or whether it's the trees or whether it's the cost of gas or the cost of living. What is it, or the cost of food? Everybody's got a problem, and they're looking for somebody to blame, but they don't necessarily know who. But it's so easy to blame Trump. It's so easy to blame Republicans. It's so easy to blame Reagan. That's why we have the mental health. And I say, well, when Reagan was governor, Kennedy was president. Kennedy had no idea how to deal with the mentally ill, and he brought somebody in to be in charge of it who had no idea how to deal with the mentally ill. So what first thing they did was they started cutting federal funding to the states. And so here you have Reagan, who is responsible for these different mental facilities.
Yeah.
And he's looking at, well, it's cheaper if we set up a program where people can be at home and get in-home health mental treatment, or local community clinics and things. And so since Kennedy shuts down the funding to the state hospitals, California has no...
they have to call an audible,
Yeah, they've got to do that. And so, and besides, a lot of the state hospitals were basically snake pits. I mean, there were movies that were made about that. Francis Farmer and some of those things. How a lot of people that just had, slight mental disorders or were alcoholics or drug addicts, they would lock them up in these snake pits and, out of sight, out of mind. So, when the funding gets cut for these state mental hospitals, then all of a sudden the state can't afford to keep them open on themselves, then they look for alternatives. And so even if one disagrees with that premise, the fact is, Jerry Brown had been governor for 3 terms since then. You start looking at all of the different Democrat leadership that has been in place, and here we are today, where the situation has never been worse, and the amount of money coming in to address the situation has never been higher. But if you have a philosophy like Karen Bass that housing first, and you're going to spend $1 billion on a 24-unit apartment building, there isn't enough money to address the issue. And if you're on the receiving end of those funds, you don't want the issue resolved,
because you keep making money.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because it all ties into the same grift, right? It's just different industries, and it gets eaten up by construction costs or administrative fees. There was this case that happened. I think it was they did a fundraiser for people who were affected by the Palisades fire. $100 million they raised, They found out that that money was sent to this organization that's in Delaware, I think, isn't even based in California. And they were supposed to help people out here in California. They ate up that $100 million, 80% of it in administrative fees.
Yeah.
And they hired sub companies to do it. And they all ate up the $20 million that they got in administrative fees. The money evaporated. Nobody received the money. And that's very similar to what's happening with all the money they're putting into homelessness.
With the homeless, with crime. That's why it is so. It's not only dangerous, but it's very unfortunate for people who really have need to let these Democrat socialist organizations that are now infused within the county governance or within the city that are getting all of this funding and are still trying to get more funding and more control. Yeah. They have a philosophy that, juvenile crime is because the juvenile they committed an offense and then they were arrested, and because they were arrested, they only got worse.
Yeah,
that juveniles that commit a crime and weren't arrested eventually grow out of it and become productive citizens. So what they're focusing on is that it's the criminal justice system that is making criminals out of individuals who just happen to have a bad decision.
They focus on systemic oppression, repeat offenders, like all those little talking points.
Right, and that it's their involvement with the justice system that perpetuates the problem.
Yeah,
and they do that by having group studies. There was one that was done at a college. And so they asked, the college students that were in this focus group, how many of you have committed a crime, growing up? And quite a few of them, acknowledged. How many of you were arrested? And hardly any of them. And they did another focus group of individuals that were in the juvenile justice system. How many of you have committed a crime? Okay, how many of you were arrested? Oh, and all of them were arrested. So therefore, the component that is the main component of perpetuating the criminal behavior is being arrested.
Yeah, that's what they just framed the study around that and just basically get some kind of consensus. And it's how could they've infiltrated so many aspects of government. You see it happening on the national level too with people like AOC. They want control. They want to turn America into Venezuela, basically.
With them in charge.
Yeah, exactly.
Not one of the peasants that are out in the street selling chiclets on the corner.
Oh no, yeah, with them in charge, and they're very open about it. There's a clip from AOC from like 2 months ago where she says that America deserves the downfall so that something better can replace it. She's literally talking about
maybe she's right, but what is the something better? Where in history has there ever been anything better?
Yeah.
We're not perfect as a society, but, the Karl Marx's teachings, we haven't seen that really played out into some real utopia.
It never does. Yeah, it just ends up in authoritarian rule.
Well, it starts off with, fairness and equity for the people, and usually ends up with the gallows or the gas chamber.
Yeah.
And if except for the 24 million people that were murdered under communism, it might be a pretty good philosophy.
Yeah, it was actually even more. I think it was 30 million in the Soviet Union, 60 million in communist China. A lot of them in both countries there was a lot of religious persecution. There were a lot of...
And there still is.
It still is, yeah. They still have internment camps in China where they have religious people at. So, people... For some reason, it's acceptable to overlook all the evils that communism did. You don't get. You may discuss that in school. I don't remember particularly discussing it. No. I just remember it. Well, my history teacher saying stuff like, "Well, communism hasn't worked in these countries because it was never applied according to how Marx saw it." That whole thing. The reality is, it ends up falling into authoritarian rule because the people who are participating in the revolution have no actual interest of making life better for the people. They just want to take power for themselves.
Right.
Right.
And that happens over and over. And that's why when I went to a grand opening of a middle school in Panorama City, and LAUSD has about $30 billion in facility bonds, and about another $10 billion dollar operating budget. And so I walk into this new school because there's a lot of money in construction for schools.
Yeah.
I remember when the Monica Garcia was the president of the LAUSD school board, and she gave a speech at an opening of a school, and she said, "We are the #1 construction entity, in California."
Wow.
Because of all of the schools that they were building. And meanwhile, the student
falling off a cliff.
proficiency is going down. But I walked into this big, beautiful school. It was, in a poor neighborhood, and there was a big mural of Che Guevara up there.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, what? It's like...
unbelievable.
Yeah,
that's Cuban propaganda. That's the kind of thing you would see. In Cuba, the outdoors. I don't know. I've never been there. My grandfather went to visit at one point, but you'd see pictures of Che. Hasta la victoria siempre.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and at a time in the past couple of years where they're tearing down all the statues.
Yeah.
We're tearing down, Father Juniper Serra. And meanwhile, over in West LA, they've got this giant bust of Lenin, and that's okay.
Wow. Wow, that's unbelievable.
Well, but that's why programs like yours, that's why it's so important.
Yeah.
Because they can no longer control the narrative. That once people hear something and they go, "What?" Now, they may not believe it at first blush, but they're prompted to do a little bit more investigation. And then when they hear from different sources, it's like, wait a minute. What do you mean that in the city of Los Angeles, organized labor wanted to take over the biggest commercial private industry in Los Angeles under the guise of the Green New Deal?
Yeah.
And as a result, the cost of living in Los Angeles skyrocketed. Now, people,
what industry is that?
In Los Angeles, the commercial trash industry for the residents of Los Angeles, whether it's an apartment building, this building here, whether it's a school, a restaurant, you had about 180 trash companies that would pick up trash from commercial businesses, office buildings, anything commercial. And you, as an owner, you would contract with a company that would give you the best service for the best price.
Yeah.
Well, LA County Federation of Labor, through a group, another one of these very pleasant sounding groups called LANE, Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy. I mean, that just sounds so unicorns and puppy dogs.
Yeah, they're so good at the euphemisms.
It's socialism.
Yeah.
And so Los Angeles Alliance for the New Economy, what we want to do is, because all of the trash that is created in Los Angeles ends up in a landfill. And landfills are bad. They're smelly. They're all of these different things. Yeah. And so and we're running out of room to dump the trash. So there's a certain amount of recyclable material, which is good, that is ending up in the landfill. That in order for the city of LA to reduce the amount of landfilled waste, if you had more control over the trash company that was picking up the trash, then you would have more control over separating the recyclable material from the trash, and thus eliminating all that recyclable material going into the landfill. So the best way to do that is to have a controlled program for the city. So LA County Federation of Labor, through working with some of the city council members, proposed the exclusive commercial trash franchise for Los Angeles. And so they divided up the city into 11 zones and said, okay, anybody can send in a proposal to get the exclusive rights to collect the trash, say all of the West San Fernando Valley, all of certain areas, they divided up the zones. Only one trash company was going to be allowed to pick up all commercial trash in that zone.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to have if you're a vendor and you want to do business with a city, say you want to supply them with toilet paper, there are a couple of criteria that you have to meet, regardless of what service you're going to provide the city or product. You have to be a union company, or you have to have a labor peace agreement with a union, which means if you're not a union company and you do not have an agreement with the union,
you don't get the contract.
You can't even submit a bid.
Yeah.
180 trash companies were eliminated with one vote of the LA City Council.
Wow.
And so all of these mom and pops that, had started, just basically what capitalism opportunity it gives you. Waste Management, a big national conglomerate, got 2 zones. Republic Services, another a national conglomerate, got 3 zones. Athens got the zones. And what the franchise agreement allowed the awardee to do is Waste Management could go in there and say, okay, this is how much service we believe you must have, and this is what we're going to charge you for it. And you have no options to do anything else except pay it or go out of business. You cannot get rid of the trash yourself. You cannot hire anyone else. There was a 64-unit condominium complex in Encino. Through their homeowners, their association, HOA, they had contracted with Waste Management. Waste Management got their zone. So they were great. We like the service we get from them. We've had them for 10 years. They were paying $1,900 a month for trash pickup.
Yeah.
Waste Management, as soon as they got the franchise, went in there and said, okay, now we want you to move the trash over here. This is the distance between the street where our truck has to travel. You have locks on here. This needs to be guarded here. When they got done, it was $19,000 a month. So it went from $1,900 to $19,000.
Wow. So they basically sold the city to the highest bidder, and then these mega corporations, right, that had this business, and then essentially trapped people into being financially coerced by these businesses.
Right.
Into
and the city gets 12% of the gross.
So the city's making money on top of it.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what it is. The more the trash company charges the customer, the more money the city gets. God. So say you have, office buildings on Wilshire Boulevard or, in Encino or, their trash fees skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And so say you're a housing provider and you have, say, a 10-unit apartment building and your trash fees go up 500%. Well, you're going to pass that down to the tenant.
Yeah.
And so, your housing becomes expensive, but not because the housing provider is pocketing the money. It's because stunts like this.
His costs are going up.
Yeah, on every level. And then when you have COVID, and then they pass an eviction moratorium where the housing provider can't evict anybody for lack of paying rent, even if they were unimpacted by COVID and they still had income. A lot of people just chose not to pay rent.
Yeah.
And so then if there's a water heater that goes out or there's a plumbing problem out or something, electrical problem, the housing provider still has to fix it. They still have to pay their insurance. They still have to pay their taxes. And
their
now
costs
the tenant
are still the same, but they're not getting the money from
the tenant.
Yeah, there's so many stories like that. And so many stories of people who lost their businesses too because of COVID. And, we need like a 9/11 commission for COVID and all the stuff, especially in California, all the stuff that happened with just Newsom and the board of supervisors too. Sometimes we were talking about hope, and now when we get into this stuff, I feel a little hopeless.
But see, and I guess and where the hope comes in, is things are the way they are because they've been designed to be that way.
Yeah,
for both parties. I got involved in politics. In 2002 is when I first got involved in politics. My involvement prior to that time was I dropped my wife off to make phone calls with her Federated Republican women.
Uh-huh.
That was it. I was just, Uber early on.
Mhm.
And I come home, and my neighbor, who's 94, says, David, I told him where I was. He goes, how come there's never a Republican to vote for Congress in our area? I was so uninvolved that I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
I had a business, I had kids, and so I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out no one had run against Howard Berman in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started asking around. Everybody said, well, you can't win. Why bother? So I was like, okay, well, I'm a businessman, and not giving your competition is not very good business.
Yeah.
And so I check with the party, and I go, oh, it's a waste of time. Look at the voter registration numbers, why bother?
Mm-hmm.
So I went down to the county recorder's office. Said, what do you have to do to run for Congress? I didn't even know what Congress did. What do you have to do to run for Congress? And I said, well, there's a clipboard over there. You just fill out your request for nomination papers, and that's it.
Wow.
And it's like, what? I don't have to have a certain degree? I don't have to get permission from the party or some special interest group? And they go, no, you're an American. Fill that out. And I thought again, how fortunate are we?
Yeah.
To have that opportunity. On my birth certificate, my father's occupation is listed as a banana cutter.
Mm-hmm.
Because his stepfather worked at the produce mart downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd bring in these big freight cars with these big stocks of bananas. And they'd unload them, and then they'd cut them up and put them in boxes to ship out to the markets.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was born in 1948. And so I looked at the birth certificate, and it says, David Raymond Hernandez, banana cutter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay. But he also went to school at night.
Yeah.
And ended up getting a job as a clerk at an insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
It was a company called Transport Indemnity. They insured all these freight liners and Peterbilts, these long haul truckers that drove nationwide. When he retired from that company, he was the vice president. And, he would go to school at night, went to college and that. So he was the vice president.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at that, where else is that possible?
No other country in the world.
Yeah. So that was, in 1955, I was born in 48 in Lincoln Heights. So we lived in Lincoln Heights from 1948 to 1955. My family bought a house in North Hollywood, which was a tract home, brand new tract home between Sherman Way and Roscoe, that is up against the west side of what is now the 170 freeway.
Mm-hmm.
When we moved in there, the 170 freeway wasn't built yet.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a big open field.
Wow.
And so here we were, and we're thinking, and the house was $13,000. That's the most that we could afford.
That's
as
so
a family.
Crazy.
And, and my mother said, well, no, let's move out to the, Woodland Hills or out there. And it was like, it was no man's land out there.
Yeah.
But all we could afford was $13,000. And so when he retired from that insurance company, he opened up the first independent Spanish-speaking insurance adjusting company.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of the insurance companies, they had car policies,
mm-hmm.
but they didn't have adjusters that spoke Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
So he went from this little house on Sichel Street to eventually to have a really beautiful condo on Belmont Shores in Long Beach with a boat docked at the marina.
Yeah.
That's the opportunity that this country offers people.
Yeah.
That's why I'm involved in politics, because we have an obligation to the people that came before us, and especially to the people that are coming after us. And so when I looked at no one had run for Congress in 10 years, I said, well, I'm going to do it. It's just I can sit back and complain, but how would I be any different than anybody else if I don't do it? Mm-hmm. If I'm able to do it. So back then, you had real primaries. You had you'd come up with a Republican nominee and a Democrat nominee, and plus all of the other parties had nominees as well. Mm-hmm. So in order to get on the ballot back in 2002, you could collect 3,000 signatures from Republicans, mm-hmm. or pay a $1,500 filing fee. Now, I didn't have $1,500 to waste on a filing fee.
Yeah.
So I contacted got hold of my Democrat friends who had never ever met anybody running for Congress, and I said, I need to get signatures from Republicans. Would you help me? They're all excited. Wow, somebody running for Congress!
Mm-hmm.
So we set up a little table at the Studio City Farmers Market. There, how the cross street there off of Laurel Canyon.
Yeah.
And as everybody is walking by, on their way to get their gluten-free food and all their stuff, my friends are saying, because they have to be a Republican in order to sign my petition back then.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, are you a registered Republican? Can you sign my friend's petition? They came back after a couple of hours in tears and said, these people are vicious.
Wow.
You would have thought we asked them if they, like child porn. They were like that angry. So I figured, well, at least I tried.
Yeah.
And I get a call from a Republican club.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, we see that you pulled your papers to run for Congress. How's it going? It's not, but, that's just the way it is. And they said, if we pay your filing fee, would you stay in the race?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, really? And they go, well, if you're not crazy, we'll pay it. That should have been a red flag.
Yeah.
You're not crazy. It's like, wait a minute. You don't know me.
Yeah.
But they wanted somebody in the race. And so they invested $1,500 in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the Republican nominee in 2002. I went to the meeting of all the Republican nominees, and Senator Jim Brulte came down and said, congratulations, you're all, running for office, you're Republicans, but don't expect any help from us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, it's my idea. No, none of them put me up to it. And he goes, and if you happen to win, you'll do what our friends in the third house tell you to do, or we'll run somebody against you.
Wow.
Okay, welcome to Republican politics in California.
Yeah.
They don't run candidates, and if somebody steps up on their own, this is the treatment they get.
Yeah.
And he goes, but he said, I want you to commit to run a second term because you're going to learn things. And so I did. I ran. I was a nominee. I became a voting member of the state party, the county party.
Uh-huh.
And in 2004, I ran again because Congress is every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I paid my own filing fee. When I got on the ballot, I was the nominee again, and then we had the meeting with all the new nominees.
Yeah.
And someone else came out to give us the speech.
Mm-hmm.
And they started, congratulations, and then I spoke up and I said, but nothing. Everybody in this room is taking time away from their family, their jobs, being with their kids, going to sports games. We're going to put up with so much crap from the opposition that not only do we not deserve it from you or the party, we are not going to tolerate it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the first things I learned.
Yeah.
The other candidates are sitting back with their eyes real big. And I said, they're not going to help you anyways.
Uh-huh.
And he backed up and said, you're right, I apologize. And so I ran in 2004, nominee again. And what I learned that it does make a difference to have a candidate in the race.
Mm-hmm.
In 2018, I just run for lieutenant governor and drove up and down the state, all of the farm communities and the ranch towns along the 5 and the 99. I met so many incredible people. Mm-hmm. This state is far from being lost. Mm-hmm. It's LA County that is really where the battle is. And so in 2018, I looked at the assembly races in LA County. Half of them had no Republican running. Mm-hmm. And so we were coming up on a deadline for filing. So I started running commercials on AM 870 radio with a program called Leave No Assembly District Behind. Mm-hmm. We were looking for Republican candidates to run for state assembly. Mm-hmm. And we offered to pay their filing fees for them and help them, just somebody with a passion, that a cause, that they didn't have to have the expertise. They didn't have to be able to afford an $80,000 a month consultant. Mm-hmm. We weren't there to take advantage of them.
Yeah.
And we got about 6 or 7 candidates that ran. They became delegates. They also appointed delegates to the state party. In the last election cycle, 22 of the 24 assembly seat races in Los Angeles County had Republican candidates in it.
That's amazing.
And all of a sudden, you know what? You had school teachers, police officers, plumbers. You had all these people that were passionate about making a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at the result of the work that we've done through our Hispanic Republican Club,
Mm-hmm.
is that we were able to get individuals in the state Republican Party as voting members.
Mm-hmm.
And a year and a half ago at the state convention, the position for regional vice chair was going to be voted on.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at my friends and someone else who was running for that position, who really didn't take the position seriously,
Mm-hmm.
that saw it as a nothing go-between. And I thought, if it wasn't a vital position, it wouldn't be in the state bylaws.
Mm-hmm.
So I ran for that seat. I won by 7 votes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all of those candidates and all of those people that they had appointed as state delegates
Mm-hmm.
that were there to vote for me at the convention.
Wow.
And so for the past year and a half, I've been the regional vice chair representing LA County to the state Republican Party. So I'm not part of the county party.
Mm-hmm.
I'm part of the state party.
Mm-hmm.
All I can do is to offer to help
Mm-hmm.
and be supportive. Through our Hispanic Republican Club, we've continued to help candidates with filing fees and putting on events. We just, as a regional vice chair, I put on the event last Saturday in Whittier, where we honored Republican elected officials within the cities of LA County. But I've also put on events to honor the delegates to the state party, because it means something for you to be a delegate. There's about 218 delegates in LA County
Mm-hmm.
to the state party. It means a lot more than just going to a convention twice a year
Yeah.
and voting. It means that you need to get involved. And the same thing with the county party. I remember when I first met Lisa and how she was just really enthusiastic. That's the type of enthusiasm we need.
Yeah.
To start doing things like doing voter registration. Start getting the wet wood, dry out the wet wood of the Republican Party that's sitting back and giving up. And all of a sudden you see activity and you get excited. And it's like, okay,
We're doing it again.
Yeah, we're doing it again. We see what's happening. We see Leticia Castillo in Riverside, who was in like a D20 plus 25 district, beat the incumbent Democrat. We see the opportunity is now here.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm working with Christina Irwin, Senate District 24. It's an open seat. She ran last time. She had to run as a write-in candidate because the districts had been redrawn and a lot of her signatures were no good because they were across the street from where the new district. She got over 6,000 write-in votes.
That's
a
amazing.
record.
Yeah.
Her name was not on the ballot. 6,300 people had to go in there and write her name in. And those people were Republicans, Democrats, Independents, because it was, parental rights,
Parental rights, yeah.
Vaccine mandates, all these different things. So now that people are aware, you have so many Democrats crossing party lines that they may not all register, but they're voting Republican because it's the Republicans that really represent what their true values are. So it's an exciting time. Now, my election is at the convention in Orange County on September 6th. And so, I am talking to delegates and saying, hey, if you want me to continue doing what I'm doing, you've got to be at the convention, you got to be registered, and you've got to be present to vote. And if I'm reelected, then I'll be there for another couple of years. So there's so many opportunities to be of service within the Republican Party governance body, but also around the Republican Party.
Well, David, thank you so much for everything you do for the party. You are a tremendous resource to not only the state, but at the county level too. I hear from so many people that have come and sat here with me and just at meetings of how much you've helped them. You genuinely are a person who is helping us, take back this state. And thank you so much for all the work that you do. I do appreciate you taking the time to come out here. You're a very busy man. And I hope that you get reelected, in September at your election. Tell the good people at home how they can find you or how they can help you with the Hispanic Club and
right. So it's losangeleshispanicrepublicanclub.com. On my Republican political efforts, it's the LA Regional Empowerment Fund because I'm the regional vice chair, but it comes with no budget. So, so everything I do, I have to cover that. But basically, and then on Saturday nights from 7 to 8 p.m., the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club radio show on AM 870, The Answer.
And how can they find out about the meetings, the Republican Club meetings?
The Republican Club meetings, you go to LAHRC.com, and then we have a calendar there. We also include a calendar to include all of the other meetings. I mean, we pride ourselves on collaborating with every Republican group. And, whether MAGA or more progressive, we're in the end, we have to be Republicans. The odds are just too great. And the crisis is too severe for us to try and fine-tune the party right now. We have to work together now.
I agree. And on social media, how can people find you?
David Hernandez, California Hispanic Republican Club, LA Hispanic Republican Club. We've been fortunate. We branched out tomorrow. I'm having our Orange County Hispanic Republican Club chapter meeting at the Casa del Sol in Tustin. And then next Tuesday, we have our Ventura County Hispanic Republican Club meeting at the, I think, the Seaside Cafe in Oxnard. And the Sheriff James Rykoff, the Sheriff of Ventura County, will be the speaker.
Next Tuesday, what day of the month? Just so that in case people are watching this.
So the third Tuesday of the month for Ventura County.
Yeah.
And the Orange County, that's going to be kind of flexible. They'd have to go to the websites to find that one.
Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time to come by.
You're most welcome.
I'm looking forward to seeing everything you do.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.